In the shadowy woods of Belgium, a legend the German army prayed was gone had just returned to the battlefield. October 1944. Deep within the Hürtgen forest, seasoned Wehrmacht troops manned their defenses. These were not fresh recruits. They were the hardened survivors of the Eastern Front and the deserts of Africa. They had endured the Soviet winter and the British advance. Now they waited for another American unit to throw itself against their lines. But the reports from command were different this time. They spoke of a new U.S. division, the 104th, calling themselves the Timberwolves. To the German officers this sounded like easy prey, another group of untested boys from across the ocean. What they could not know was that these men were led by a commander whose name would soon be muttered with dread in their bunkers. A general so fiercely aggressive and unorthodox that his own superiors had already relieved him of command once before. His name was Terry de la Mesa Allen. The Americans knew him as Terrible Terry, and he was preparing a brutal lesson in modern warfare. How did one American commander become the personal nightmare of German forces from Africa to the heart of Europe? This story isn't just about battlefield strategy. It's about a leader who shattered the rulebook when it cost his men their lives. A man who drank heavily, swore constantly, and valued victory far more than a polished appearance. A commander fired at the peak of his career, only to come back more formidable than anyone imagined. To grasp why German soldiers learned to fear him, we must start at the very beginning. Terry Allen entered the world on April 1, 1888, at Fort Douglas, Utah. He was born into a legacy of military service that spanned generations. His father was Colonel Samuel Allen, a dedicated career officer who had served across the American frontier. The tradition ran even deeper. His grandfather, Captain Carlos de la Mesa, had fought for the Union in the carnage of Gettysburg. Captain de la Mesa served with the 39th New York Volunteer Infantry, a unit famously known as the Garibaldi Guard. On the battle's second day, he was wounded in the vicious fighting through the wheat field and the peach orchard, areas that saw thousands fall in mere hours. He survived and served until the war's end. For the Allen family, military duty was not a choice. It was an inheritance. It was in their blood. From the Civil War to the Indian Wars, service was the family's core business. Young Terry's childhood was spent on army posts throughout the West. He learned to handle a horse before he could write a full sentence. He mastered a rifle before he mastered long division. He was a product of the old cavalry, the army that still believed in the power of a mounted charge. This upbringing would define his entire approach to command, for both good and ill. In 1907, Allen received a coveted appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point. It was the dream of every military family. He failed utterly and completely. Terry Allen despised West Point. The endless mathematics, the rigid structure, the confinement of a classroom, it all chafed against his restless spirit. He stammered during recitations and accumulated demerits for small acts of insubordination. His fellow cadets gave him a nickname that captured his nature: Terrible Terry. The academy was designed for those who could conform, memorize, and obey. Allen was built for motion and decisiveness. In 1911, after failing ordnance and gunnery, he was dismissed. For most, this would be the end. The shame of failure would close the door on an Army career. But Allen's stubbornness was his greatest asset. If the established path was blocked, he would carve a new one. He enrolled at Catholic University, earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in 1912, and on November 30th of that year, received his commission as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army Cavalry. He had made it, not through the front gate, but through sheer force of will. This pattern, refusing to accept a closed door, would characterize his entire life. His first test came in 1913 on the Mexican border. Lieutenant Allen, with only 6 troopers, confronted a band of 30 Mexican cattle rustlers. Standard procedure was to wait for backup. Allen ordered an immediate assault. His small force captured or killed every single rustler. This was not the action of a by-the-book officer. It was the action of a man who saw an objective and took it, regardless of the risk. Then the Great War arrived. Allen was desperate to see combat, fearing the conflict would end before he could prove himself. When he finally reached France in 1918, his assignment was a disappointment. The 315th Ammunition Train, hauling shells to the front. It was not a glamorous command, but it was a foot in the door. Eventually he got his chance, taking command of the 3rd Battalion, 358th Infantry Regiment, 90th Division. He led his men in the Saint-Mihiel offensive and then into the Meuse-Argonne, the largest battle in American history. It was in the mud and chaos of the Western Front that Allen perfected his signature tactic, the night attack. Most commanders avoided night operations. The risks of confusion and friendly fire were too high. Standard doctrine was to dig in at dusk and attack at dawn. But Allen observed a different reality. His own data showed that well-executed night assaults resulted in far fewer casualties. In daylight, enemy machine gunners and artillery observers had clear targets. At night, that advantage vanished. Surprise became a weapon. The fear and disorientation that worried other officers worked in the attacker's favor. Allen developed a precise methodology for night fighting. Meticulous daytime reconnaissance, simple, clear plans that every soldier understood. Prearranged signals with flares and whistles. He drilled into his officers that complexity was the enemy in the dark. Keep the objective simple, move in silence, and then strike with overwhelming force. On October 24, 1918, Allen was hit in the face by machine gun fire. He was evacuated, but he convinced the medics to release him, returning to his unit with his wounds still fresh. This wasn't mere showmanship, it was leadership. His men saw their commander, bloodied but unwavering, refusing to leave them behind. The message was clear: we share this fate, now follow me. For his courage, he was awarded the Silver Star and 2 Purple Hearts. The war ended, and Allen returned to a shrinking peacetime army. The interwar years were a desert of stagnation for ambitious officers. The army collapsed from millions to a skeleton force. Promotions froze. Men who had led battalions found themselves stuck as captains for over a decade. Some gave up. Others faded into alcoholism. Allen, ever the fighter, endured and prepared. In 1920, he won a grueling 300-mile horseback race across Texas. That same year, he won a bronze medal in polo at the Antwerp Olympics. He was the epitome of the cavalryman, a master of a form of warfare on the brink of extinction. But he was also a student of war, studying German tactics and the emerging potential of tanks and planes. He knew the next conflict would be nothing like his cavalry past. He trained his men relentlessly, always preparing for the war he knew was inevitable. Then, on October 1, 1940, his fortune changed. General George C. Marshall, the Army Chief of Staff, was rebuilding the forces. Marshall had an eye for talent, and he saw something in Lieutenant Colonel Terry Allen that others missed. He promoted Allen directly to Brigadier General, skipping the rank of Colonel entirely. It was an unprecedented leap. Marshall overruled objections about Allen's rough edges, believing that combat leadership trumped polish. In May 1942, Allen was given the command that would make his name, the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. Marshall called him an outstanding leader who can do anything with troops. He was about to prove it. On November 8, 1942, the Big Red One stormed ashore at Oran, Algeria, as part of Operation Torch. This was America's first major offensive in Europe. Allen led from the front, as always. The division suffered 418 casualties securing the beachhead, but they succeeded. The real trial came in Tunisia. The Germans, commanded by the legendary Erwin Rommel, were veterans of desert warfare. The Americans were novices, and they paid in blood. In February 1943, the Germans launched a massive assault at Kasserine Pass. Inexperienced U.S. units broke and fled. It was a humiliating defeat. On February 21st, Allen and General Paul Robinette counterattacked at Jebel el Hamra. Allen personally directed artillery. His troops captured 400 prisoners and the line was stabilized. The disaster was contained, but the lesson was seared into the American command. They could fight the Germans, but only with the right leaders. Then came El Guitar in March 1943. This would be Allen's proving ground in Africa. For 21 grueling days, his division endured constant attacks from German panzers. The fighting was merciless. On March 23, the crisis peaked. German tanks smashed through the front lines and headed straight for Allen's command post. His staff urged him to withdraw. It was the logical move. A headquarters shouldn't be on the front line. But Allen understood morale better than tactics. If his men saw the command post pulling back, their spirit might break. His response became legend. "I will be damned if I pull out, and I will shoot the first man who does." He stood his ground, walking outside to watch the tanks advance. His calmness steadied everyone. The forward units, seeing their general refusing to retreat, held firm. American tank destroyers and artillery engaged at point-blank range and repulsed the attack. El Guitar was the first time an American force had defeated a veteran German armored unit. They had met a commander who would not yield. In May 1943, the 1st Division led the final push on Tunis. The campaign ended with over 250,000 Axis soldiers surrendering. The Big Red One had suffered 2,000 casualties in the final 17 days alone. Some companies were down to 50 men, but they had won. Next was Sicily. On July 10, 1943, Allen led his division ashore at Gela in Operation Husky. General George Patton had personally requested the 1st for this difficult landing zone. The initial landing succeeded, but on July 11th, German tanks from the Hermann Göring Division counterattacked, nearly reaching the beach. Naval gunfire and desperate infantry resistance finally stopped them. Omar Bradley later wrote he doubted any other U.S. division could have held. The beachhead was secure. The toughest fight was ahead. Troina. This mountain town was a German fortress. From July 31 to August 6, Allen's men attacked. The combat was house to house, uphill and brutal. The Germans launched 24 separate counterattacks. All 24 were beaten back. When Troina fell, the road to Messina was open, but the Big Red One was shattered, exhausted after 9 months of non-stop combat. On August 9, 1943, Time magazine put Terry Allen on its cover, hailing him as a brilliant commander. There was one cruel irony. 2 days before the magazine hit stands, Omar Bradley had relieved Allen of command. The reasons were complex. Bradley felt discipline in the division had grown slack. Allen and his deputy, Theodore Roosevelt Jr., cared more about winning than spit and polish. Recent evidence suggests Eisenhower and Patton had planned the relief before Sicily, believing Allen was perfect for the hard early fights, but not for the long, disciplined war ahead. Eisenhower later said it was a terrible injustice to call it a relief for incompetence. Bradley admitted that none excelled Allen in the leadership of troops, but lamented his lack of disciplinary instinct. At the peak of his fame, Terry Allen was sent home. Most men would have retired in disgrace. Allen asked for another division. On October 15, 1943, now a brigadier general again, he took command of the 104th Infantry Division at Camp Adair, Oregon. These were not veterans. They were young men from the West, factory workers and farmers. They were green. Allen saw only raw material. He embarked on the most intense training regimen in the U.S. Army. While standard training required 12 hours of tactics per week, Allen drove his Timberwolves for 35 hours. They trained 6 days a week, and he focused on one thing above all: fighting in the dark. He drilled them in silent movement, compass navigation, and hand signals. He ran full battalion night attacks with live ammunition. Other divisions thought he was insane. His men were perpetually exhausted, but he was teaching them to survive. He knew night assaults, when done right, saved lives. By the time the 104th shipped to Europe in 1944, they were the only American division specifically trained for night combat. Bradley would later admit they were the only division prepared for it. That preparation would soon be tested in blood. On October 23, 1944, the Timberwolves entered the line in Belgium. The German veterans in the forest awaited what they thought were easy targets. They got a nightmare. That first night, Allen attacked. Companies moved like ghosts through the woods, using compasses and memory. They struck German positions from unexpected angles. Sentries were eliminated silently. Strong points were overrun before the defenders could react. German artillery was useless without clear targets. Machine guns fired wildly into the void. By dawn, the Germans were shaken. Entire platoons had vanished in the darkness. These were not green troops. They were predators of the night. Urgent reports flew up the chain. This American division was different. They owned the dark. The pattern repeated for months. The 104th crossed the Mark River on November 2nd in a surprise night assault. They cracked the Aachen sector's defenses. When the Battle of the Bulge erupted in December, they held their ground, absorbing the German onslaught. On February 23, 1945, they crossed the Roer River and drove into Germany itself. Their reputation spread. German units warned each other about the American night fighters. Even the propaganda broadcaster Axis Sally complained about the unfairness of their tactics. If your enemy calls your methods unfair, you are doing something right. On March 5th, they captured Cologne. On March 22nd, they crossed the Rhine. The division advanced 193 miles in just 9 days. Then, on April 11, 1945, alongside the 3rd Armored Division, the Timberwolves liberated the Nordhausen concentration camp. What they discovered would scar them forever. Approximately 3,000 corpses lay where they had fallen. 750 living skeletons clung to life. The camp had been part of the Dora Mittelbau complex, where prisoners were worked to death building V-2 rockets. Allen ordered everything photographed. He forced German civilians from the nearby town to witness the horror and to bury the dead. The soldiers realized the true nature of the evil they were fighting. From April 15, 19, the division fought a brutal 5-day battle for Halle. During this fight, Allen met Count Felix von Luckner, a famed World War I naval captain known as the Sea Devil. Von Luckner, hoping to save his city, helped negotiate a partial surrender. The two old warriors, from different eras and nations, treated each other with mutual respect. Later, von Luckner was made an honorary colonel of the 104th. On April 26, 1945, at Prech on the Elbe River, the Timberwolves met advancing Soviet troops. The Reich was cut in half. The war in Europe was nearly over. Allen's division had fought for 200 consecutive days without a single major defeat. Sometime after the capture of Cologne, Omar Bradley visited Allen's headquarters. The man who had fired him 18 months earlier now saw the results. The 104th was performing superbly. According to his memoirs, Bradley told Allen, "Terry, I am pleasantly surprised to see these young Timberwolves of yours already, ranked along with the 1st and the 9th as the finest assault divisions in the European theater." To be compared to his old Big Red one and another elite unit was high praise. Allen's reply was pure terrible Terry. "Brad, the 1st and the 9th are in damned fast company." It was not arrogance, but the quiet confidence of a commander who had proven his point. The methods that got him fired had built another elite division from scratch. The war ended on May 8, 1945. Terry Allen had led 2 different divisions to legendary status. He retired on August 31, 1946, a major general. He never received his 3rd star, perhaps the price for being too much of a fighter and not enough of a politician. His drinking concerned superiors, but General Marshall had written him a warning letter, not a dismissal, because he delivered victory. War correspondent Ernie Pyle wrote that Allen did not give a damn for hell or high water, and was the only general he called by his first name. After retirement, Allen settled in El Paso, Texas. But peace was brief. On October 17, 1967, his son, Lieutenant Colonel Terry Allen Jr., was killed in Vietnam. He was commanding the 2nd Battalion, 28th Infantry Regiment. The very unit his father had led in World War I, in the Big Red One. He died leading his men in an ambush known as the Battle of Ong Than and was posthumously awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. The loss shattered the old general. His health failed, and on September 12, 1969, Terry de la Mesa Allen died at age 81. He was buried at Fort Bliss National Cemetery next to his son. The United States Military Academy, the institution that once dismissed him, now presents the General Terry de la Mesa Allen Award to the top cadet in military science. The failed cadet had become one of America's most effective combat leaders. The Germans in Belgium learned the hard way that Terrible Terry was back. He had taught them that the night no longer belonged to them. If you were gripped by the story of this relentless commander, show your support for Winds of Thought by hitting the like button. It truly helps the channel.